The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone Marinade.
That's
The Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle. Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 82, and our guest is Jamie Barrier of Pine Hill Haints. Pine Hill Haints is a band from Alabama who describes their sound as Alabama ghost music. They fuse country, bluegrass, punk, gospel, and so many other things to create a sound that's wholly their own. Their latest record is called The Song Companion of a Lonestar Cowboy, which was released on May 14th. Check that out and then go back into their catalog. Y'all, this was such a pleasure. Jamie and I talked about the DIY nature of the band, some of the crazy characters that have influenced them, the music Jamie was listening to at the time, so many other things. It was just a wonderful conversation. He gave me quite the musical education during this talk, and we really hit it off. I'm so thankful for his time and really excited for y'all to hear this. Hey y'all, before we get to our conversation with Jamie, I want to shout out 2 of our new Patreon patrons. Welcome William and welcome Kim. Thank you so much for your support. Y'all, Patreon is a place to interact on a deeper level with the show. For just a few bucks a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, our Patreon happy hours where we all just kind of hang together, our Marinade live recordings. We just did one recently and it was such a blast where patrons got to just be a part of the show, the actual recording of the show with our friend Seth Walker. Patreon.com/Marinade podcast to join if you can swing it. We'd love to have you. All right, y'all, that's enough of me selling you. Here it is, my conversation with Jamie Barrier of Pine Hill Haints. Give me a chance, I'll blow your mind. Oh, how long will you leave me out? You won't even let me try. Give me a chance, I'll blow your mind. Yeah, you got me?
Yeah. There you go.
Cool.
You got me?
Yeah, I got you. Hi, Jamie. How's it going, man?
Great, man.
Good. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah. Me too, man.
Yeah, I was doing the research for this, which is always so fun. Like I'm so fortunate to talk to so many cool people. And when I was doing the research for this, the more I dove into your music, the more I was like, oh yeah, this is my shit right here. This is like, yes. Yeah. And there's a few reasons. Like, I think, all my people are from Eastern Kentucky. And so I think there's like a little bit of, there's some bluegrass in there and there's some gospel in there and there's some country in there. And it's like all the shit that I grew up on, but it's a totally different thing. And so I was just so fired up the more I got into it. And so I'm really stoked, man. And I love the new record. So I can't wait to get into all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I think, as I was listening to it, like I said, when I hear all those different influences, it's almost like on a personal level with my own, I write like kind of protest songs, folk songs. And but like in my head, it sounds it needs all that stuff that you do.
Yeah.
It's like I
Yeah.
can't do all that stuff, so it's like three chords and the truth. But what I really want it to sound like is that, like, I want some of now what I now know as Alabama ghost music. That's the stuff that, like, I want to accomplish.
The scene we came out of years ago, it was very protest music. It was very political, like anarchist or whatever. So like, yeah, we were always the odd one out with that, but that's kind of what we were born with. So
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's interesting how you guys had some, and you can hear a little bit of it, but how you had some kind of punk roots to some extent, and then how
yeah,
that
yeah,
evolved into
yeah,
what it is now. You
yep.
know.
Hmm.
Well, let's get ghosty, man.
Right.
I it's funny how, like, the universe puts all this stuff in your way. It's like, for whatever reason, I've been having ghost conversations lately and
Yeah.
thinking about, like, kind of darker elements and things. And I'm someone who has gone on record quite a bit on this show as being terrified of death, but as a result, I'm constantly facing it, right? Because I know I need to, and so I'm constantly working on it. And I wonder, if we can just go ahead and get heavy right now, and what your
Yeah.
relationship is like thinking about death and darker kind of stuff.
Well, I guess to try to go positive with it, it keeps your music real, because
Mm.
like death is such an inevitable thing, and the further you stray away from that, you're just not keeping it real. It keeps you honest. So,
Mm.
especially like you're talking about the music from where you're from. It's so heavy in there, man. It's just like it's part of it. That's the way I want my music to be. Try, not intentionally, we're not like a. That's been a thing with the Haints since day one, where it would be real easy to go real corn dog with it. Like, I mean, I'm nothing against someone if they were like painted their faces white and black and went, gothic acoustic punk, but we tried to keep it real. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
That's real though. It's part of it, and it's part of our indigenous music. So.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know you grew up with music around you and grew up playing at a pretty young age. And so I am kind of curious about that too, what that music was like, and how much of it stuck with you uh, to seep into the music now. Like, when you were kind of growing up playing, like, what was that like?
Well, depending on the band, it depends on the degree. But with this band, it's heavy. And I grew up at a little church called Pine Hill, and I've been coon hunting and everything. I played music up there, thrown horseshoes, and my mama sang with a group called the Pine Hill Singers, and so I've probably been to 200 or 300 funerals where she did the 4-part harmony. I've sang with the Pine Hill Singers now too, like sort of along the same lines. And some of the other bands I was in, I was like trying to step away from it, but I guess as a late teen, I started to embrace it. So I just let it take over, so to speak.
Let's unpack that a little bit. I'm also, by the way, on the audio, I'm picking up, like, I don't know if that's on my end or yours. I'm picking up like some papers or something.
That's me nervously.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Cool. What's your relationship like then with the church in that way? I mean, is that something? What now?
It's always been there. It's always been a part of my life, and it's just I embrace it, man. I've had people attack me for it, and it probably deserve it, but it's there. But anybody from this part of Alabama can tell you the same, It's all around you. So my family has been in this area a long time, even from the tribal side to the settler side. So the church is just the village. It's just the community. So I know them all, It's just like, it's something you couldn't get away from it unless you moved away,
Yeah, no, I get that. I think, and for me, I moved away,
Yeah.
like, that's what I did. And so that's why I'm so interested in the conversation to unpack, because I think so many of us, especially those of us who grew up in the South, we had those choices and we made one or the other,
Oh, yeah.
and I feel like I'm constantly wrestling with it. I'm constantly wrestling
Yeah,
with that relationship.
to the end, man. That's what the music's all about, dude. You just nailed it.
There you go. We're done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that's so. In some way, it's sort of the music. In some way, I don't want to misquote you here, but it's the music like you working through that relationship.
Yeah, maybe. I guess I'll try to think of it real simple, man. On one level, I grew up. My dad is like you could say he's a preacher. He's asked to go here and there, everywhere, somewhere different every Sunday, and that was my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
My dad comes from a poor, like didn't have running water. Half the family were illiterate, and they were like the snake handling side. My side was literate,
Mm-hmm.
and but there's no mega churches, man. No light shows, no sound systems, no nothing. The church I was raised in had an outhouse, still does.
Wow.
And I own land back behind there and have a bunch of cattle there. And anyway, when I got older and discovered Minor Threat and Bad Brains and all that stuff, it was real similar. It was like I went from Black Sabbath to Minor Threat, with the rest of a million other kids did too.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a good way to describe where the church is I go. It's real like that. There are no like David Bowie's there. You know, it's all like the circle jerks. It's all like, there are no rock stars. It's total just like, hey man, blah blah blah. Okay, so and so just died. We need to cook some food and bring it to her. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't mean to delve too far with it. I guess with the Haints, it's a similar type of thing. Like just trying to. It's basically like experiencing all this other beautiful music when I started to tour, and then when I'd come home and I'd be like, I don't even know what my music is like. So that's really what it is. Trying to figure it out.
Well, that's an interesting point too. And there, I guess two questions come out of that. And the one is how you got to Minor Threat, like how, especially growing up where you did. Was that around? You have like an uncle or something, or like?
No, I would be a late bloomer with something like that. No, my uncles are country as hell. Like, one of them is basically a Mennonite. He just believes in electricity. The other one's this is his old park ranger shirt. He's like a truck driver now. No, there was a kid at school, man. There's just some kid. You have your kids that are kicked out of school to school, and they're like, hey, check this out. I'm like, wow. Sensory overload.
Right.
I was always obsessed with music, so whatever it was, if it's good, I'm probably going to get down with it. But Minor Threat, that was like getting hit with ice cold water. I was, oh man, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
It was like 2-3 years later though that I met Ian and was distroing records for Discord out of my house, and I probably booked 20 different Discord bands they played in the living room. So it was a life-changing thing, I trying to bring that into like whatever you were doing with the country music,
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting how that works. It works so well, but I think a lot of times we want to, our brains want to kind of compartmentalize things, and and so that's, I love how you call it Alabama ghost music, because it's like, well, it ain't gonna, you can't compartmentalize that. Like, it's gonna have all these different things, and I think sometimes it's so interesting to me, especially when the punk guys end up picking up a acoustic guitar later, and I love that shit. Like, I love a lot of that stuff. And I love what Tim Barry does and what Chuck Reagan does and that kind of stuff,
Those guys, Hot Water, they played my best friend's house, my first tour. All they had out was a sticker.
Wow. And you were there?
Yeah, we did 2 Hot Water shows, and we did an Avail show down the street like the following year. So that's sort of the same thing that we were born out of, as far as that goes.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense to me. There's
a Discord band named Hoover. And I booked Hoover, and then they changed their name to the Crown Hate Ruin. And I remember sitting on the porch with their drummer, and he was like going on and on about Muscle Shoals music. And I was like, I don't know what in the world you're talking about. He's like, are you serious, man? Where are you from? And he's like, talking about Hawkins. He's naming all these guys, and I'm like, I don't know anything about it. And he's just like, oh, dude. And he was like introducing me to all these guys from Discord, and they're like, this kid's from up around Muscle Shoals. And I was like, hey, and I didn't know anything. They knew all about my town, and I knew nothing about it. So like,
well, okay, so then what happened? So you get that introduction. Like, how does? Because now, I mean, you've worked with David Hood, if I'm not.
Oh yeah,
right, and like
great man, David. Yeah, but
like you've worked with a lot of those folks, and then you know, in the newer generation, Ben Tanner produced your most recent record, and
right.
So how can you fill those gaps?
That was like almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's really wild to me though that you were there. Basically, you were there and you didn't really know the thing. You know,
I didn't know. All I knew is getting the paper. That it seemed like every 3 days there's a story on Leonard Skinner in the paper. So at first you're like, I love Leonard Skinner, you know, and then you get to be a teen. You're like, I hate him, you know, hate him, and then somewhere along the line, I remember getting a copy of Wilson Pickett, and then there's Dwayne Allman. I had a photo of Wayne in the background. I'm like, what's this? You know, I probably shouldn't be saying all this to the world, but that's just how it is growing up here, you know.
I think it's great, dude. I think it's great that I just picked up a copy of Wilson Pickett, Hey Jude, that whole that whole LP. I just played it last night. Last night I played it.
Wow.
So I think that's great. What you just said, because sometimes we outside of Muscle Shoals kind of romanticize it in a way where we think like you just must have been like dripping in soul music, and you know what I'm saying? Like and when I go there, like I've been there a couple of times, and I'm just like, oh, because it wasn't my existence. And so I think it's so interesting that you were there, and it took a little while for you to be introduced to it.
Yeah, everything in my life has been in the naive way. I've always loved the all that. I love the Delmore brothers. They're like unknown, but they were from like 30 miles from where I'm sitting, and they arguably have the first rock and roll song ever, Blues Stay Away From Me. That's the stuff I was raised with. The Leuven brothers, the Delmore brothers, or W.C. Handy. With the Haints, we were, I guess in a way, I have all these books of junk I've collected from old timers around here, and they'll be about, you know, the only reason there's even a town is because of that river down the street, and guys would go sit on the river while they unloaded cotton and loaded cotton, and the songs they would sing would be about some outlaw or something. That was the kind of thing that like I tried to trip with the Haints, you know, like, whoa, what is this? It's like even there's this Indian mound in town, in the heart of town, and no one knows why it's there. You know, there's these bones washing off, you know, and stories from my dad about the Indian side of our family. That it was more of that type of thing. I just happened to be lucky to have the Muscle Shoals thing. Is like I'm down with it and I'm into it, but that's more of a luck thing, you know, for me. I was like, oh wow, I was raised on something else, you know, like more ancient, even though I didn't know it till even after that conversation with the Discord bands, where I'm like, oh, maybe I should go back and dig on my roots, you know. And my daddy's like, you know, your granddad, looking at him in the coffin, he was like a Choctaw Indian with a buzz cut. He was like telling me about when they jumped off his you know, great granddad jumping off the Trail of Tears and all this stuff. So anyway,
so much great stuff there, man.
It's kind of delving away from the music a bit, but anyway.
No, it's cool. We do that. Because I'm curious about a few things there. I mean, you said luck, but at the same time, you had to have the antenna up. You know, you had to have the antenna up, otherwise you wouldn't have received it, and you wouldn't have then also. It sounds like you have quite the curious mind, also, not only in listening to your music, but from what I hear.
Oh yeah, man, totally.
So, like, because are you constant, like at that time that you mentioned, where you're getting these old timers books and you're trying to learn about the area? Yeah. Are you just constantly reading then? Was that a big part of? Yeah.
That's like one of the best things of the positive of the COVID pandemic was all the reading everybody got to. But no, yeah, I've always been a big into that sort of thing, you know. But I'm not. I don't want to paint the picture of somebody that's only into this area. Like I like it all, man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm down. I'm totally down. Like my favorite would probably be the Caribbean, that type
That
of
comes
stuff.
out. That
And
comes out.
I love the Irish stuff, and I love the Cajun stuff. So it's not a. I don't want to try. I'm not thinking I'm the best. I like the Haints. We get to play with a lot of these bands that I idolize, and I feel real guilty because like we don't have that boom they have. Like we're like almost like the kudzu or something. I'm just like oh no, like here we are, you know, like
I don't agree with that.
I have a guy that the guy that taught us about the singing saw was from Pensacola. He was in an incredible band called This Bike is a Pipe Bomb. His name is Rimo D.
Okay, I know that
Intro
name.
tour, Rimo D, like we crashed at his house and he's like, "Can I join the band and can I do the tour?" And he jumps in the van and yeah, he was one of the ones that broke us in on so much of that type of stuff, you know, like about the singing saw that comes from here. But Ramo D had done shows for Neurosis and The Offspring and Green Day plays Liberty. He goes way back with the punk thing, but he was like learned a whole lot about the world music and indigenous music from Rimo, you know.
Well, there's so much. I mean, you mentioned all those different things that you're into, and all that stuff comes out on the new record too. It comes out in a lot of your music, but it comes out all those influences you just mentioned, the Irish music. I mean, on this, what else you mentioned, like island music, Cajun music. There's, I mean, the single. I think the most recent single, I think it is it Lonestar Kid that has that kind of feel to it, right? So there's so many things on the song companion of a Lonestar Cowboy that all the things you just said, like you just naturally kind of organically said, that all comes out. And I love that. And so, yeah, I don't think anybody would, again, like, I don't think it's possible to pigeonhole what you do, but I also think it's super dynamic. And I've been watching as many videos as I can get my hands on, and I'm stoked that you guys are planning to come to Florida coming up soon. I'm gonna head over to Dunedin, I think it is, in Lake. See if I can make a weekend out of it and check y'all out.
I'm down to that, dude.
Man, that'd be so much fun.
That song that you know, like the latest single, it is like it's a perfect wannabe Marty Robbins, but it's a rip off of like classic rock steady. That's exactly what that song is. All those classic rock steady songs, you know, walking down the road with a pistol in your hip, Johnny, you're too bad.
Yeah.
So, all that's what that song is.
That's great.
It's like all those Jamaica that they had a beautiful way where they would frame American cowboy and outlaw music, man.
Yeah.
Even outlaw country, whatever. I was listening to just bought an LP of a dub artist called the Outlaw Josie Wales. Classic early Jamaican dub named after a Confederate movie character who's on the warpath. Oh, there's something to that, you know.
I want to hear you guys do a whole cover. I want you to do the Harder They Come. I'd like to hear y'all do like.
Dude, when I found out that one of those songs was cut in my hometown, I do like rep that.
That's great.
Even though a song is all about being miserable, I think it's about being miserable in Muscle Shoals. It's like sitting here in limbo. Oh God, I'm going crazy. Let me out of here. You know, if you listen to the lyrics of that song, it's like I'm sitting here in limbo, but one day I will carry on.
Oh man, yeah.
But whatever. Harder They Come is dope, man.
Yeah, so good. I tried to do some. I didn't realize how much music that I like has a singing saw in it, and then when I was doing this research, I was like, "What is the history there?" And I wonder, like, when you meet this guy, then he introduces you to it. Like, were you immediately like, "Oh shit, that needs to be a part of what we're doing. That's going to be there." What was that moment like? And other than obviously the badass rock and roll spontaneity of him just hopping in the van.
he was in a band we idolized, and he was in a bunch of bands with a guy named Aaron Comet Bus. Comet Bus is like, he is the writer of the American underground for like, he was, maybe not so much now, but he is Comet Bus is the punk rock underground literary. He lived by writing zines, traveling in the back seat, hitchhiking, train jumping. Over the years, we've got to be sort of friends with him. He's real elusive, but he played in a lot of bands with Rimo D, and so anything Rimo said to us was gospel. And the Haints is just piles of dumbness and illiterate. We didn't know what we were doing. We were skateboarding downtown Auburn, and there was a guy hitchhiking through town on his way to New Orleans, and he was like, "Hey man, I'll show you how to put together a pickle bucket and make you got your own bass," because we were constantly complaining about something or other. That's what you do when you're from Alabama, you know. But it was, oh, I need a stand-up bass. I need this. And he was like, you don't need a stand-up bass. There's just this weird kid that was skateboarding with us, and the police came and ran, and we dunked the boards in the trash can and hid in a bathroom stall. And I remember he's like, all you need is a pickle bucket and fishing wire and all this. And that's how we get. That's nowadays people are like. I lecture on wash tub bases and stuff, but it was not planned. And it's the same with the saw, you know, Rimo D, like Rimo D plays with Comet Bus, you know, and Rimo D's in the van. He's like, you need a singing saw. In 1922, you know, 20 million saws were sold all over. It was, you know, like Rimo D was a true anarchist and still is, you know, he's like, let's take the music back, you know. It's our music. But you don't like. I'm so happy y'all have a wash tub and a washboard, but we didn't have it planned that deep. But he thought we did. He's like, oh yeah, take it back. You know, take the music back. You need a saw. I'll play the saw. Let's make a drum out of a hubcap or something. We would try that, but it never was very. Didn't work, you know. But yeah, that a lot of that was through him. We learned, and he had a little book he'd written called "Singing Garbage," and we probably sold 3,000 or 4,000 of those out of the back of the van. We Xerox them and staple them, and there's all these instruments you can make at home, and you get a banister from a stairwell and make your fiddle, maybe make the bow for the fiddle and whatnot. But that is an Appalachian or Kentucky thing, like even corn silk fiddles and all that I've learned since then, you know. But it's cool, man.
That is super cool. How much of that now, all these years later, how much do you recognize? I know you haven't toured in the last while, but you know, things are normal these days. How much of that do you recognize in your touring now?
It's probably stronger than ever, that type of thing. We didn't know it in what we were doing in the beginning, but the more you get older, I like how tour every night's different. Some nights we'll just like, let's do no stage, no Sandman, no monitor, and we'll go and get in the back corner next to the women's restroom or something and create a stage. It's just like skateboarding where you find a cool bench and some steps and bam, it's the funnest time you've ever had with your friends. Like try to do that. There was a heavy band, the Monotonics from Israel. I remember playing shows with them, and they've got a full drum kit and bass and drums, and they would do that. It would blow my mind. They would just walk to a far corner. That band Lightning Bolt from Rhode Island, the same, you know, kind of like Metallica on Candy. Redefinition of stage. They'll move to the back of the room. Like a lot of the bands with Kay that we used to do records with Kay, they would like put on shows in a stairwell outside or something like that. Like, so the Haints were a good band. Experiment with that. We'll like, there's some nights on tour where the show's canceled, so we'll set up in the parking lot and word gets around and we'll have a show. We'll light some candles. So, and being able to go acoustic, all of a sudden your songs are different and you got to play them faster or slower. And I love that, man. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Trying to do it different every night. So it works, man. And so it's probably more now than it ever has. as
Wow.
well.
So that's great. So you sort of learn these lessons about how to take that
Yeah,
same ethic, right? And then apply it practically in certain ways. That's the dream right there, right? Where you're still
yeah,
maintaining sort of that
exactly.
same DIY punk rock kind of ethos while also being able to then make it something that's a little bit more practically applicable as you age.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's a,
Man.
it's it's worked so far. It gets
Yeah.
one thing we can't do that I would do in my other bands is we would always have this giant hammer of noise. Can't do that with the Haints. Like we gotta constantly be on our toes. I I'm fine with going down with a burning ship. It's like these poetic acoustic boys, like we and girls. We can't. But in the past, I would always be like, "This is our last song," and you would turn everything up and like feedback and get loud. I can't do that with this band. So
Why? Can you?
we're a good alley band. We can like toss the ball up and then the guy band actress just dunks the quiet, there's only so much volume that we can do. And
Oh, right, right.
there's only so and that's not really it's not what it's about. So we have to go with what it is.
That's interesting. You made a couple of sports and quasi sports references, and there's a song on this record about Satchel Paige, and I want to get into that too because that's so exciting to me. Immediately, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to the whole thing at some point," but I'm going
Yeah.
straight to Satchel Paige Blues as a huge baseball fan. But one of the things you said earlier that actually came up, I recently sat down with Todd Snyder and I had this wonderful conversation. And
Yeah.
Todd talked about how he was into sports growing up, but that he kind of got away from it at the point where he was like, I didn't like keeping score, man. He's like, I liked the games, but I really wasn't into keeping score. And he kind of shifted gears in his focus. And I read a quote from you about skateboarding where you kind of alluded to that idea of how there's not really a score, right? It's sort of like an
Yeah.
athletic endeavor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not like, there
Well,
aren't points.
it's like basketball. It's beautiful. It evolves. You get your 3-point line. You got, it goes from Dr. J to Jordan, but it'll never touch skateboarding, man. Ever. It'll never touch it. There are no rules in skateboarding, so it always evolves.
Yeah.
The second you're lame, the kids are done with you. You can't like Nike's constantly trying to take skateboarding over and steal it, but they can't. They never will. You can't compete with it and you can't gamble on it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason you got basketball and all this stuff throughout COVID is the gambling guys are running the world. You can't own skateboarding. Like it is always outlaw. The second they figure out how to neuter it, it'll die. Even in the 80s with ramp skating, it was so huge. Like I like all of the sports, and I'm with you on not like we used to try to do basketball where we would have two balls going at the same time, or sometimes we would have a one goal but three teams. Me and my friends would try all kinds of stupid stuff to try whatever, but my heart would be with baseball.
Yeah. Okay, let's go there. Why?
All night, man.
Because what is it? It's a songwriter thing. There's a songwriter thing about that, and every time a songwriter that I talk, it's an obsession of mine. I watch almost every Reds game.
The Reds.
Yeah.
There was nothing more beautiful when the kid came back to play with Griffey Senior.
Yeah.
That was the year I was a Reds fan, man.
Yeah, they homer in the same game, and
so and Griffey Senior, that's like the best ever.
Yeah,
it seemed like he was going 4 for 5 every night. Like,
yeah,
I love. There's a lot about baseball, man. Like, the whole it's got the vibe of the country and out in the wilderness of America, but it was born on the streets of Brooklyn. Like, oh, dude, I'm sold.
Yeah.
I like the whole. I like the whole like don't eat these M&Ms and you'll get a double, and eat this M&M and you get a triple. And the catcher's he's got like makeup on his first 2 fingers so he can give signal. I love it all, man.
Oh man.
That was Satchel Paige. It's just the whole not giving up and the power and spirit of the Negro Leagues. Like there's nothing cooler. I love in today's game, I love all the guys from Mexico and from the Caribbean where they all got the gold and the chains and they're just kids.
Yeah.
They are stoked to be. I remember watching Sammy Sosa show how to make a glove out of a milk carton. My daddy was sitting there with me watching it. He was like, "That's real. Well, that's a poor boy." He's like, "This is how you make a glove out of a milk carton."
Damn. That is amazing. Yeah, and for folks listening, for the Satchel Paige, there's a song called Satchel Paige Blues on the new Pine Hill Haints record. And, Satchel Paige had to play in the Negro Leagues because he wasn't allowed to play in the major league.
From Alabama, so
yeah.
Mobile boys, so we're trying to rep Alabama with it.
That's great. Oh, it's great. I love it. I love the song. I love the record, man. It's so great. It's so wonderful. And one of the things that I've noticed about your record specifically is that even though some of the songs are shorter, are kind of punk rock in length, right? There's usually a ton of songs on your records, and I wonder, about that. Like, what is that a function of, and how aware are you of that?
Well, all right. So the long answer would be like, how you idolize like Jelly Roll Morton, Louis Armstrong, all these cats on the Spanish coast. They're playing every night and they're working and they're trying to figure out how to keep that crowd. That's the way I want the Haints to be, a band that's always playing with these interesting characters. We gotta have it. We gotta have songs are written. It's like, we just played a song and everyone danced. It's like, what can we chase it with? And we're like, so I'll go home and try to write the perfect chaser. And so usually when it comes time to make a record, we've got a million tunes to pick from that we've played a million times. And that's how the single lock, not to diss on my own record label, but I've put out enough Haints records on my own label, and I've put out records for other ones, but more people are going to hear this record than like any of the other ones I've done. So we were like, try not to overthink it. Like, what are we going to do, man? We actually cut a lot out. We probably cut 30, 40 minutes off. Like, I thought the single lock one was too long, but Ben and Reed were like, you got to put that on there. Yeah. I was like, okay.
Well, what is so much good stuff. Every time you talk, man, I want to ask you so many questions. What is your process like then? So it sounds like you play a song and you go like, are you heading right home and writing, or are you a sit down and do the work kind of person? What does that process look like to write that prolifically? You got to be doing a lot of work.
I'm not saying the songs are any good at all, but I've never had a problem writing. I've had a problem of like, I need to stop. Mm-hmm. I work on something every day, all the time. That's just how I am, man. It's how I've always been. And it doesn't mean it's good. It's just how I am. So, and being in a band is hard, man. It's entertainment. Where no matter what, like, you don't want to suck. It's hard to, it's hard to write something good.
Yeah.
So, and then even if you do, it's hard to capture it on tape or whatever. So, I don't know. We were grooving that night, the single lock one though. We could have. Even if that had all been aborted and deleted, I would. Man, it was Christmas. It was like magic. My homie JD had driven down. He wasn't on tour. Nobody knew the chaos that was about to drop on America, and we just like. I've been wanting to work with single lock forever. I could hit their studio with a baseball from my shop right down the street. I've been dying to work with them forever. So it was like, let's just play some music. That's what we did, and Ben would walk in and tinker with his forest of mics. I just let him do his thing. We just played and played, so they were like, all right, let's go take a break.
Oh my gosh. That sounds magical.
It was a nice one, man. It was a nice one.
For folks listening, Ben Tanner has come up on the show several times because he's produced so many different records that of the folks that that guy must not sleep. Like, he produced the Colonel's new stuff that's coming out, whenever. And then I'm trying to think who else. There's several other folks who've been on the show recently that Ben
Yeah.
produced their record or worked on their record in some way. So he comes up a lot. So that is so beautiful. That sounds like kind of, that sounds so magical. Like you just sort of, you had exactly this sense of what you wanted and you guys just went in and did the damn thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so beautiful, man. Do you think there's any lessons? And I can relate to some extent. I don't usually get writer's block. I do get, I've just written something that's shitty. Right. And I do that a lot, but I don't get writer's block very often. When I sit down to write, I can just write.
Same here, man.
Yeah. Like is there lessons for folks? Cause a lot of folks that are really good at it get blocked. And I wonder if there's any lessons that you have learned or any insight into why you're not ever blocked.
For me, like probably most of what I'm writing, you can trace directly to something I've lifted. So it's easy for me not to. Yeah, I'm always listening to music. I love to sing. Even like the church thing, man. Like, there's so much music everywhere, especially here where we're at, man. And it's like I don't know. It's not so far to this point in my life. It hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
Like, man, I brought a bunch of LPs up here. Like, I was told to read, and I didn't even get the half. I can show you literally where this album came from.
That sounds amazing.
Let's see. I'll start with let's see if you can see that. This is Count Ossie this is like a heavy roots percussion record. It's surfing music, man. And if I lived near the sea, I'd probably never touch a skateboard again. And with the Mystic Order, the Revelation Rastafari. Next, probably my favorite singer-songwriter, man, is Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. This is the record to me where he came into his own. But there's a song on here called Wild One. So good, dude.
That's Fighting is the name of that record.
Fighting came out right before the Jailbreak record.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I like all those Lizzies. There's some stinkers, but whatever, man. Like,
yeah.
That's my favorite ever. Luke Kelly of the Dubliners. He is my number one, like probably ever. There's Ronnie Drew, I love. Years ago, we had a chance to get to play with some of the guys in this circle, but we got deported, so we missed it.
Wait, what?
Spent a couple of days in a jail cell in England and got sent back to America.
Wait, what's that story?
I mean, it was actually a guy who was in and out of Planksty. This man. If you ever get a chance, Johnny Moynihan is his name. He's still alive. And he introduced the bouzouki to Irish music. It's like a staple now, but we had a whole tour with Johnny Moynihan. This is the stuff, man. This is what the Haints. I'm just glad the Haints start with a P because we can be in the Pogues and the Planksty section of the record store. You know what I mean?
So you were gonna wait. This is awesome, but you're bringing up so many interesting things. So I don't want you to stop with the records because this is so great. But
that's all right.
Gonna play with the Dubliners and then
not the Dubliners, but guys in their circle.
Okay.
Johnny Moynihan. He was in a band called Sweeney's Man. He was in Planksty.
So then you got in trouble? Yeah,
we got in trouble. We did like 7 tours of Ireland in a row without a work visa. And we just go over there and we're like, hey man. They're like, what's up, Yanks? And we're like, oh, we're just going to go to the pubs. And they're like, have fun.
Yeah.
We got caught.
So they incarcerated you and deported you?
Yeah, fingerprinted and
holy shit.
And we got banned for a year, I think it was. We actually, all of the band got through, but our drummer, man, I could say some stuff about him involving contraband and everything, but they caught him.
Oh, bummer.
We were afraid he was like busted. And when we went back to get him, they were like, oh, you're a band, huh? And then it was all dogs and
wow.
yeah, that was that was a bummer because we had a film crew and we were going to be playing with this guy Tim Kerr. Tim's a legend, early '70s skater, folk artist, and he was in the Big Boys, the first one of the first hardcore bands out of Texas. Big Boys toured with Minor Threat. They toured with the Misfits. They toured with the Dead Kennedys. And Tim was touring as a Haint. He's like, hey, man, I'll play harmonica and the banjo, tenor banjo, which we did do a tour with him after a year later, but it wasn't the same, you know.
Yeah.
But we got to do, anyway, I don't even know how I got on that subject. It was real tragic.
Yeah, bummer, man. Thanks for telling the story, though. Thanks for indulging me.
There's the Pogues, man. This is before they were burnt. This is like between the first and second album. Just bought it. Could not be better. This record could not be better. It's what I never remember to do with mine. Is I'm always trying to get emo, and they're just like, "Hey, keep it real." You know what I mean?
What is that one? What is that record?
The Pogues BBC Sessions. It's
BBC
like,
Sessions.
yeah, so good, dude. Right before Costello produced their next album, and Kate married him and left the band. This is my soul brother, who I dream of being for the state of Alabama, even though I live in Tennessee. Doug Somm. He's real Texas, you know. Anything with Texas that comes out in his music, even his garage pop, it's like you can see the border. You can hear the food fried. He played fiddle. You know, he played on the knee of Hank Williams the night before Hank. The last show Hank played living.
Wow.
But he was like, you know, ran with the dead. All his, you know, his life story. But he's like, I'm trying to encompass that as far as like the Haint sound, like Alabama sound, like whatever it is to be here. I want it to breathe out. Winston Rodney, also known as Burning Spear, first album, absolute gold. He used the same drums like Count Ossie for this record. It changed the music. This record's so light. It's just light, easy, acoustic. It's like it's gospel music, man. I used to print shirts for him, so I'd talk to him on the phone, you know, like, hey, what's up?
Cool.
Johnny Ace. It's like a lot of people in the country in Americana, they don't understand the doo-wop and the crooner music and soul music and the magic that comes from it.
Yeah.
AC/DC's Power Age, this is my number one album of all time. It's pure, real. This is as real as it gets. Made the same year as Highway to Hell, but like this is the record. There's no fun times and there's no singles on this album, you know. Jesse May Hemp Hill. This is the father of like Native American and blues and black. The Tennessee Valley and the Mississippi Hill Country. Jessie May is like it. She is it, man. And she never got her day as far as I'm concerned. And so thought I'd throw that. This is my last one. Heart of the Congos. You know, it's better than Nevermind or whatever it is, you know. It's up there with the finest Tribe Called Quest, you know.
Wow.
Like, this is physical graffiti. I was just telling Reed, like any Beatles, I'll put this up there with it. Like they supposedly could sing the whole record a cappella, but there they are in a screen printing shop, you know, doing their traditional hand drum, you know. There's the squeegees in the background. There they are fishing, and everything about this record is solid gold. Every song on it would be the best song on an album later, you know, but it's all here in one. It's Lee Scratch Perry at his finest.
Oh, right on.
Born Attracted, and it's like,
oh my God, that was so much fun. You gave me way too much homework, but I'm loving it. So are you, that's a hell of a record collection in its own right. And so are you constantly on the road picking up records?
No, I do all my buying usually in New Orleans and Portland, but
okay.
Yeah, I'll get them if I see them. I do like buying records.
Yeah. yeah. It's there's something about it, folks. I think most folks who listen to the show are like-minded, but there's just something about I could just get lost and spend forever. I mean, the other day I picked up that Wilson Pickett record that I talked about. I picked up an old Alabama, the band Alabama for
Yeah,
nostalgia stake from the 90s, from the 80s, but for me from the 90s, you know,
yeah,
because I was
yeah,
listening
yeah.
to it as a kid. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, I got Creedence. I picked up a Creedence
Yeah.
record that I hadn't listened to in for Cosmos Factory. I hadn't listened to in
The
forever.
best one. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's just like
Yeah.
just sitting there, you know, for $6 or whatever. And I was like, and they look so cool, and he's on a bike, and it's like, man, I just
They have one of them's playing a washboard and the other one has a wash tub.
so good, man.
Another one of those like year one Haints like, check this out. And there's Creedence skiffle band. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
We were studying that picture, man.
That's so great. So are you, when those records you just showed us is that you're listening to it while you're writing the songs, or is that while you're recording, or all of the above?
While I'm writing, yeah.
Writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music while you write songs
I have.
at the same time?
I've also watched a lot of baseball while I write. But
that's
you know how it is, man. Man, probably 80% of stuff is like riding home in a car. You know,
Yeah.
I remember writing Satchel Paige in the car, but I live 40 miles from town, and so that's what I, you know. But yeah, all of the above on the songwriting, I guess.
That's so great, man.
A lot of people don't like to write on tour, but I like that. That's something that's hurting songwriting wise. Like night after night, and you're seeing what's working. It's easier. It's like, oh, I need something like that. I haven't been able to do that. You know, I can't feed on that. I just have to imagine. So yeah, I miss playing and writing on the road, man.
That's interesting. I agree that most people I talk to don't write on the road. They say that they can, or they don't, or that they're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's just the way I'm geared, I guess, man.
I've never toured as a musician, but I do travel as much as I possibly can afford to travel. And when I travel, I write more, I think, than when I'm home.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I'm inspired by, I like routine, don't get me wrong, but I'm inspired by what's happening. Like I'm able to get out of this is my life, these are my domestic duties and so forth. Like I can get encumbered by all that stuff. Whereas when I'm on the road, that stuff is either taken care of or I'm not worried about it.
Exactly right. Yeah.
It frees me up.
Yeah. It is easier for me when I'm singing and playing every night. I can just, it's really easy. You can just tell what you need. I need a song like this, you know. Plus, after day 3 of any tour, it can be months or weeks, but after 3 days, you can't sleep and you can't wake up either.
Yeah.
You're just in this like kind of miserable state, but you're real happy. Like then you can detach, and it does make it easier to write, you know. Especially when I got the band all right there. Like, let's do this, let's do that. Well, yeah. We have a lot of shows where we're terrible, man, but we're probably writing a song in front of the crowd.
Yeah, I wonder about that. So when what that process looks like with the band, especially since over the years you've had members cycle in and out, and so is it that you're writing something and you're coming straight to the band with it, or does it kind of marinate for a little while for you?
It's both. It just depends on the tune, I guess. Yeah. Man, you know how it is though with any band. The best songs are the ones that like they're done in like 10 seconds or whatever. You don't even have to show anyone what to play. Those are always, I've got those ones where it's math problems, but they're never as good.
Oh, interesting.
It's like I been a year on this song, you know, but those usually don't develop legs or anything. It's like, you know how it is.
That's so interesting. Well, I think for some folks it's that way, but for some folks that I talk to, they're really meticulous with their editing, and the editing and the development of the song oftentimes is what they're. Sorry, I probably look super weird with the sun coming in through the blinds like that. It's like some kind of space alien. But now I just look like a Care Bear. It's just like the light coming out of my chest. But I think a lot of folks that are more comfortable with that editing, process and with letting it sit for a while, whereas some folks are more comfortable with what you talked about. I'm not sure that everybody feels the same way you do in terms of like the best ones are the ones that come right out of you.
Yeah, I don't. A lot of times there'll be a song that I like, and you read the biography, and they're like, "Oh, that one, it happened."
Mm-hmm.
Session was done, and we're like, "I got the song," and I'm like, "Wow, of course." Yeah, maybe not. I don't know, but for me, that's it always seems to be that way for me. I don't know. I have a million songs I'm putting a lot of time into, but like they just never seem to have that honest flow to them. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I read something cool Neil Young said where he's like, no matter what it is, if it's good or bad, just don't stop till you finish it. I thought that was cool. I tend to have like 5 of them songs I'm working on, and I'll just jump back and forth, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I was like, maybe I shouldn't do that. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, because there may be some gold there, right? So there may be something that's really magical there. That's why I do this show, because I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to pick the brains of people that do it well, so I can just, at some point, get my head around my own process and hopefully share with folks who are listening that can glean something off of somebody's process and something resonates with them, and they're able to then, just take that and it translates to whatever they're working on, whether it's a song or a book or a poem or.
I feel it for like the kids today, because like the little scene I came up with, all we did was like try to write music and press little records and go play as many cities. Used to, everyone did that. Like, I don't know what the kids are doing now, but I feel it for them, man. It's like, just because you have a cell phone doesn't mean you're like intelligent, like just because you can like do directions. I don't know, like I think a lot of, I'm not accomplished. I'm like, I'm not accomplished. I'm like, so I'm not like some big shot giving sound advice from my cloud to the aspiring up, I'm still down there. But I'm like, man, a lot of people, they're so into the bells and whistles and the smoke and having all this, that, and the other. Like, it doesn't matter what you have if your band ain't no good and your song ain't no good. Like, you should just, that's one thing. All the kids, when I was coming up, there's this underground network all over the world, really, but America, and we would just tour and play each other's houses. It was beautiful. Like, it's harder to do that when you get older, and I feel it for the kids today, because I don't know if they have that. It's more like, I have 7,000 friends, and it's like, I don't know. You should. That's a lot of pressure, I guess I'm glad I don't have to go through it now. I'm glad I went through it the way I did, but everyone, it was just all about writing a song and getting out and playing it, man. The end.
That's so interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because on the one hand, a kid coming up now has so much access to getting their stuff out there and so much access to whatever music you want, you can dial up at your fingertips. So whereas you had to have the cool uncle or the older brother who turns you on to it before, or you had a cool record store in town, now you can search it in so many ways. You can listen to a podcast that turns you on to something. You can, watch a YouTube series that turns you on to something. The damn algorithm tells you might like this or that,
I just feel like an organic scene always wins. It's always going to be a higher card when you got homies. In any town, if there's 30 or 40 people that all get along and they're cooking out, grilling out with each other and trading music and whatever they're doing, forming bands, that always wins. It's always better. But maybe I'm wrong, man. They're like,
I don't know. I think the thing that I'm hearing and that I'm noticing
from cities or whatever now, but
well, I think the thing that's great about what you said is that, if I can add on to it, is just the idea that like you're kind of sitting in an organic scene. You're sitting with you're sitting with the art longer, it feels like. And so you get to know it better, and you're
Yeah.
able to kind of get a better sense of how you access it, and then how it influences your own work versus, I just wrote down all those names of those records that you recommended, and I'm going to have to stop myself from just like skipping back and forth. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to go straight to Heart of the Congos first.
Yeah,
That's what I'm going to go to first. And I'm
That's
just going
the
to,
classic record we had where one of the mics, there's only 4 channels.
yeah.
One of them is going out the window, and they followed the mic out, and it's hooked up to a palm tree. And they're like, "What's up, Scratch?" And he's like, "Heartbeat of Jamaica." Like, think about that there's a cow that's sampled all through that record. There's probably a cow grazing outside the studio. It's all over the record, man.
It's amazing.
He used it on so many of his. It comes from that classic Heart of the Congos album.
I got to do that. But I need to sit with it, right? To go back to the conversation about the organic nature of it, is I'm sure I can find that record, digitally somewhere. I'll probably be able to find it. But, if I just listen to it one time through, it may not land with me that one time through. If I had the physical copy, it probably will land with me. But if it didn't, if I had the physical copy, if I had picked it up at the record store, I'm going to give it another spin and another spin and another spin. I'm going to give it more time, and I'm going to have to stop and flip it back over. And I'm going to have a conversation with the record store guy that I got it from. And, or if somebody recommended it to me or loaned it to me, I'm going to have those conversations. And I'm thankful that, I'm kind of in that tweener age, I feel like, where I can do both. I'm 40, and I feel like my brain can handle the digital, but also I'm nostalgic for the physical. And so I'm constantly going to record stores, and going to shows and asking questions.
Most of my stuff I buy on tour, but there's something to be said about anything you do, even your radio show. But for me, music, there's a lot of guys here in this town, and they're in every town, and they know everything, and they're wise guys. But you ain't nothing if you hadn't got out there for 10, 20 years and had to pee in the toilets of strangers and sleep on the floor. And you're not going to eat unless you do good that night. Changes your music. Makes it everything. I've had so many people, everybody has, they tell you this, they tell you that. But I've always idolized those guys like Earle Burnside, all those guys who lived like a wolf out on the road. Their music is lean and mean and good. And if you don't play good, you're not going to eat. It's like a difference in having a domesticated dog. People like their little puppies and their dogs, and then a coyote where everything he does is out dependent on the wild. And same thing with picking up music. You get out there on the road and you meet those people, and they're like, "You need to hear this Heart of the Congos record." I'm like, right on. Yeah. It's something that I probably came across just traveling. And I'm loving it. It's not this miserable death match or anything, but I'm out on tour. It's where I learned my jump, man.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's so thank you. This has been so wonderful, man. I don't want to take any more of your time, but I love the new record. It comes out in May. It's wonderful. This has been more than I could have asked for. I expected that we would have a good conversation, but I could not have anticipated having this much fun and learning this much. So thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care, brother.
Thanks, man.
I'm standing on the mound in the pouring rain. I got a ball and glove, I'm ready to play the game. Ooh, set 'em up, I knock 'em down, I do it every time. Give me a chance.
Jamie Barrier, y'all. Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank all of you for listening. What a fascinating guy and a wonderful band. Check out their record, The Song Companion of a Lonestar Cowboy. Go to thepinehillhaints.com for all things Pine Hill Haints. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Tell a friend about the show. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. All of that stuff is free, and we really appreciate any support that we get. The biggest thing is just listening. But as I mentioned up front, if you really like what we're doing and you can swing it, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can gain Patreon exclusive content. Plus, it's just a really fun way to interact a little more deeply with the show. All right, y'all, it's time for what I'm getting down on, the segment of the show where I talk about the art that is inspiring me at the moment. This is an almost all Willie Vlotton edition of what I'm getting down on. Willie is a creative hero of mine. He's a huge influence on my own creative work. His band Richmond Fontaine is one of my all-time favorites. I just love the way that Willie writes. Richmond Fontaine stopped making records a few years ago, but he hasn't stopped at all. He has written songs for a band called the Delines that he plays guitar with and does a little bit of background vocals. Amy Boone's on lead vocals on that. The records are just wonderful. I'm partial to Colfax, but their latest one, The Imperial, is on heavy rotation. Amy has this gorgeous voice, and Willie's writing is just forever too cool. I'm a big fan of what Willie does. And, if you listen to this show, you know that I raved about his last book, Don't Skip Out on Me. And his new book is called The Night Always Comes. It's absolutely gripping. I read it in no time, just a couple of days really to read it. It moved me in all kinds of ways. And I have a very cool announcement about that. Willie and I recorded an episode of the Marinade earlier this week. So a huge shout out to our friend Ben over at Records Revisited. Check out Ben, y'all. Check out Ben's show, Record Revisited. He's had so many cool guests on, and one of those was Willie Vlotton talking about Tom Waits. You can't get much cooler than that, I don't think. And I'm not saying all this just because I also have the announcement that I've made over on Twitter already, but I'm excited for y'all to hear it, that I'm going to be a guest on Records Revisited to talk about Frightened Rabbit. It was a pretty personal conversation. I opened up in a way that I don't think I even do on Jason's Journey, which is our Patreon show that I pretty much bear myself completely on. But this may have been the most personal I've gotten publicly. And we talked about the wonderful record by Frightened Rabbit, Pedestrian Verse. So that's coming up soon. Check that out. All that Willie Vlotton stuff, y'all. The Delines has just been on heavy rotation. I just have not stopped. And I highly recommend The Night Always Comes. Willie writes these characters that are complex and very flawed and so lovable. Nonetheless, he just taps into that human existence, that thing that we all have that connects us, that makes us all flawed, but at the same time gives us our commonality. And I'm really grateful for Willie's work and so excited for y'all to hear the conversation. Y'all, we've had so many amazing conversations. David Huckfeld, we got Caleb Johnson coming up, Willie Vlotton, Seth Walker recorded with our Patreon patrons there and present. We've got recordings coming up that I'm going to announce on Patreon very soon. And the 5 more episodes that we have in the can after this one that are already recorded that I'll be working on in the next few days are just amazing. I'm so grateful for everybody who listens, everybody who agrees to be a part of this show. Thank you so much. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.